Friday Eve, right? I love the energy in the room, so I so appreciate you joining us on a Thursday night. So for those of you that I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I'm Dory McWhorter, President and CEO of the Executives Club of Chicago. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the club's 4th annual Talent Outlook. Talent Outlook is a flagship event for the HERMAC Institute at the Executives Club. And for those of you that don't know, I'll give you a little more information about HERMAC in a minute. But if you've attended this event before, welcome back. And if this is your first Talent Outlook, as it is for me because I'm 4 months into the role, thank you for joining us. I'm looking forward to the panel's insights into the future of the workforce, especially as the workplace in all of its various forms continues to rapidly change. So the HERMAC Institute is short for Human Resources Management Association of Chicago. And HERMAC brings together HR practitioners and professionals across industries to tackle challenges that impact talent and organizational management. So if you're interested in becoming involved with HERMAC, please see a staff member or a member of the HERMAC Council, many of whom are here this evening. But before we jump into our great panel, and I have to say I've been looking forward to this panel because I got to sit in on the prep call and it was very good. So I'm like, oh, I can't wait. But before we jump in, I'd like to recognize this evening's presenting sponsor, WTW, and our featured sponsor, both UL and Essential, and of course, all of our seasoned sponsors make this possible. Their support not only makes programs and opportunities such as Talent Outlook possible for us, it also empowers the club to deliver on our mission to challenge, inspire, and activate leaders to shape business and our world. So now I'd like to introduce Mark Vila, WTW's Head of Corporate Risk and Broking, U.S. Midwest Region, to say a few words and to introduce our panel. Mark?
Okay, good evening, everyone. As Dory mentioned, my name is Mark Vila. I'm also a Chicago market leader for WTW. WTW provides data-driven, insight-led solutions in the areas of people, risk, and capital. We partner with organizations to tackle the people issues that drive business outcomes, and we're thrilled to sponsor the event again this year. The workforce landscape is evolving faster than ever, shaped by the rapid rise of artificial intelligence, the presence of 5 generations in the workplace, and shifting expectations around upskilling, reskilling, and the overall employee experience. To navigate that, the human resources field has undergone significant transformation in the last several years. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the future of talent, exploring how leading organizations are staying ahead when it comes to attracting, engaging, developing, and retaining top talent. We're excited to be joined by an outstanding panel of thought leaders. I will move from your right to left. Amber Canali, Chief Human Resources Officer at William Blair. Michelle Green, Chief Human Resources Officer at USG. And Corey Kentanga, Head of Economics at LinkedIn's Economic Graph Research Institute. For those of you that have been regular participants in the Talent Outlook, we do have a change in moderator this year. Our friend Imran Qureshi was unable to make it. We are, however, pleased that we have an excellent replacement in Rick Sherwood. He's WTW's Midwest region leader and my boss. He's also the head of our integrated and global solutions business in North America, and he's going to guide today's conversation. Please join me in welcoming our panel to the stage.
Thanks, Mark. You definitely get bonus points for that one. So welcome everybody again. I'm Rick Sherwood. I'm thrilled that you all could be joining us on this glorious evening to talk about talent, something that I think all 4 of us are pretty passionate about. It's funny, the Executive Club has been doing, this is the 4th year that they've been doing this Talent Outlook, and it's been an annual event. And there was some joking, like as we were prepping for today, it's like, is once a year frequent enough? I mean, there's so much going on in talent, like it seems annually might not be the right frequency. So feel free to give us some feedback if you want to have this more frequent than that. And actually, that's one of the things that was predicted in last year's session. I guess quick show of hands, who was here last year? All right, so you'll hold us accountable for tying back to last year. So one of the things came from last year was the idea that just the pace of change is going to continue and definitely not slow down. And guess what? That was right. I don't know about you all, but I feel like actually the pace of change has even sped up more. So similar to what we've done in prior years, we're going to ask this illustrious panel for some predictions and thoughts about what's going to happen in 2026. So fair warning, everybody, think about some things about that. And the pace of change prediction was probably the one that definitely panned out. Some of the other things that we discussed last year, a little mixed. One of the themes from last year's session was about technology and the sort of intersection of technology and the workforce. There was kind of a bold prediction last year that AI was going to sort of take over the world and totally change the workforce. Show of hands, has AI totally changed your workforce yet? Not yet. Right, so, and we've seen that, yes, there are some companies, I think IBM made an announcement, Lufthansa's made an announcement. There are companies that are dramatically changing their workforce based on efficiencies driven by AI, but not everyone. And actually some recent research has shown that CEOs and other C-suite executives are frustrated with the return they're getting on their AI and investment, and specifically because they don't have the talent to drive that AI agenda. So, I think we still haven't quite figured out sort of how AI is going to impact the workforce. So we'll probably talk about that a lot. One of the other things from last year was about talent development, and specifically the idea, should organizations shift their strategy from build or to buy? Building being focused on upskilling or reskilling talent, and buying being, do you just need to go out and acquire the talent through some sort of transaction? Interestingly enough, in 2025, the transaction market is actually lower than it has been in many, many years. It's starting to pick up, but it's still pretty low. And a recent survey that I was just reading actually shows that 3/4 of employers are actually saying that they're going to start to invest more in upskilling and reskilling. So I think we still haven't cracked the nut if organizations are going to be able to shift their buy, build talent strategy. So more to come on that. And then lastly, the labor market. I think I personally am wondering, how is 2026 going to shift between sort of the power of the employee or the power of the employer in the labor market? I think obviously a few years ago we had the Great Resignation, and that really shifted some power dynamics in the market. Now I think we're seeing that there's some sort of the big stay, where employees are a little afraid to make dramatic changes broadly, but I think employers are definitely having problems and continued problems attracting and retaining some critical skills. Again, technology, AI, and other critical skills. So some of the predictions came to fruition, some of them were a little mixed, some of them are let's see. As we get into our discussion today, I think there's even more kind of interesting things out in the world happening that are going to impact our talent strategies. One interesting thing is just, I don't know if it's interesting, just the amount of turmoil there is in the world right now. Geopolitical turmoil, I think, is at potentially an all-time high. And unfortunately for most companies, that means they're being more cautious around talent decisions. And specifically bold talent decisions. So we'll see how that plays out, and we can talk a little bit about that. There's also the continued shift in the labor pool. Baby boomers, as planned, are starting to retire more and more. And something that I don't think we really planned was the ability to import talent from outside the US is getting harder and harder. So that sort of talent mix is definitely something that's being asked or being thrown out there. And lastly, I have to talk about technology, and yes, we'll say AI 45 more times in the next hour, but it's really interesting with AI and employees. I think what we see is that employees as individuals are really excited about technology and AI and how it'll impact their personal lives, but they're really anxious about how it's going to impact their professional lives. And so that sort of push-pull, combined with the fact in the US we're at an all-time high where employees are anxious about making ends meet and having their salaries pay for their living costs. So there's all this sort of churn out there, which is going to be great for our panel to discuss and debate and to hear from all of you. Hopefully you'll see as we go through this discussion on the boards, there's an opportunity to submit questions by texting it to a number which I've already forgotten, but it'll be up there. Please do submit questions. We have some prepared things, but we'd love to make sure that we're answering your questions, and so please do submit them. Before we dive into the prepared questions, I did want to turn it over to Corey, our economist, for a second, just to share some of the things, your reflections on the last 12 months, and I don't know, what you're seeing in your crystal ball.
All right, well, I can't imagine that anything interesting is happening right now. I don't know why you needed me. All right, so let me chat to you all a little bit about three things. So I'll talk about what's next, I'll talk about what's now, and then I'll talk about what to watch for, risks and opportunities. So when we talk about what's next, well, what's the outlook? What are things looking like next year? It turns out that next year actually looks a lot like this year. Growth is going to be probably on par with what we're seeing this year. It's a little sluggish, but not recessionary. So there'll be some growth, there'll still be opportunities, but it's still going to be running slower. What does that mean? That means we're probably not going to be growing fast enough to absorb new workers entering the workforce. So unemployment will go up. So the labor market will continue to have leverage for employers. It'll continue to be a frustrating market for job seekers. So candidate experience is going to continue to be a critical aspect as you start to think about talent. So the growth outlook, again, similar, but in many ways it does still feel like we are at an inflection point when it comes to the labor market. Why is that? Well, over the summer we did see a slowdown. We saw a meaningful slowdown in the labor market in terms of the number of jobs being added, in terms of the pace of hiring that we're seeing. So the labor market does feel very fragile. And to tell you how fragile it is, 80% of the jobs added this year are coming from healthcare and social services. That's it. 80% of the roles that have been added are just coming from one place. Everywhere else, when we do see hiring, often it is just backfilling. So people are leaving their job, people are stepping into new jobs. And by the way, we don't see as many companies doing backfilling either. That used to be around 60% prior to the pandemic. Every month we'd see a worker come in and out of a company. Now there's only about 50% of companies where we see workers coming in and out. So the labor market does not have a lot of momentum. And that brings me to what's now. Because as hard as it is to predict the future, and there are a lot of risks and uncertainties, and we can chat about that, it's equally hard to know where we actually are today. And, I can't imagine that there are some current circumstances of why it's even harder at this very moment to know what's going on today. You all know we were supposed to get a jobs report last Friday. We did not get that jobs report. So there's even more uncertainty about where we actually are in this moment. So one of the good things for me about working at LinkedIn is I have access to a lot of data. So I can get a read on things and understand what signals we have and what that tells us about the labor market. So on LinkedIn right now, when we look at jobs per applicant, that tells you the balance of supply and demand. The jobs telling you the demand, the applicants telling you the supply. That actually looks pretty balanced. It's about the same ratio that we saw in 2019. So the labor market is pretty balanced between supply and demand. And we see wage growth stabilizing as a result. So that premium that workers were getting during the Great Reshuffle when they would take a job and then quit 6 months later, I imagine that was hell for you all. That is no longer the case. That premium is pretty much gone. So you do have a premium when you switch jobs, but it is much more normal. So in many ways, the labor market has normalized. But hiring is very slow. And that is ultimately the main thing that we see is that employers are very cautious about hiring. And that has continued to be the case, and as a result, we don't see as many folks quitting. And so when you think about, well, what are the risks? What are the opportunities? Obviously, a lot of risk and opportunity around AI. But one thing that was mentioned that I think is important for us to hammer home, the workforce is aging. We have about 8 people retiring every minute in this country. So if you do not know how many people you have at risk to leave your workforce within the next 5 years, you are missing out on one of the biggest phenomenon that's going to affect talent and talent leadership. Managing that change, managing that transition, that's not just going to be a talent strategy. That is going to be business critical. Do you have the right people in place? Or do you have folks who have expertise, who've decided to leave the workforce and retire? How are you going to get that knowledge from that person onto whoever is going to step into that role and replace them? And we see a lot of leadership now also talking about, well, we won't have any entry-level workers. We don't necessarily need those. Maybe AI can do a lot of that work. Well, imagine 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Those folks who are in that middle management, they're not just going to sit there forever. They're either going to move up or they're going to move on. So who are you training to move into those roles? So how are you going to manage a workforce with different generations that potentially want different things? So we can talk about AI all day, every day until we're blue in the face, but when you start to think about what is that crest, what is the tsunami when it comes to talent, particularly in the US, it is demographic change. That's both a risk and an opportunity. Managing it extremely well, maybe AI is really what is going to allow you to manage that, to do that change management, to transition to having a more competitive workforce in terms of being able to recruit talent. Because the balance of power is in employers' hands, that's very clear. But that is going to shift with the demographics. There's just no way around it. So with that, let's start.
I love it. Like doom and gloom to get into the conversation.
Economics, the dismal science. That's what you brought me here for.
No, Corey, that's great. And Shelley and Amber, to pull you into the conversation, actually, I want to pick up right there. Like, one of the things that I know we talked about in our prep, but I think I'm hearing from many organizations is what you described, where, the push for automation generally is for more routine tasks and lower level, the tasks that all of our entry level people used to do. So many people are slowing down hiring entry level people. What does that end up doing to your overall talent strategy 5 years from now when you didn't hire any entry level people? So I'd love to hear from each of you, like, how are you addressing sort of the overall talent strategy? Are you slowing down entry level people? And then what does that do for development longer term? And maybe Shelley, let's start with you.
For those who don't know me, I'm Shelley Green. I'm the Chief People Officer for USG Corporation, and if you don't know what that is, we manufacture building materials. So sheetrock brand, drywall is our brand. We do ceiling tile, ceiling grid, floor products, lots of roofing, lots of fun stuff. So manufacturing is largely what I'm going to spend some time on, because that's where we've seen the biggest amount of challenges for us over the last 4 years. COVID wreaked havoc on our manufacturing facilities in that we were having, in some cases, some of our locations, over 100% turnover of people with less than 1 year of service. You cannot keep up with that, and from a knowledge transfer, even our long service employees, which for us, a 17 to 20 year length of service hourly employee is not unusual for us until COVID. And it's very frustrating for our people to keep training people and watch them walk out the door. And so automation, while very important to us, we have 70 some facilities across US, Canada, and Mexico. Some of them are over 100 years old. You cannot put automated guided vehicles very easily into an asset that is 100 years old. And so while we're trying it, it doesn't always work. And so back to the question of, we are still hiring lots of entry-level positions. We are on an early journey of AI. When we first handed out the questions, I know Dory and the others got to experience this, they gave me the questions and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not the right person to talk about this
You're
stuff.
the only one. You're the only one that hasn't nailed AI.
The HR team, we have a commitment that we're going to practice our own AI journey right now, and we have to be accountable of speaking to it. But we are still actively hiring entry level because we need people that are willing to manufacture, and we have some challenges, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but we are not experiencing a slowdown right now on hiring our entry level.
That's great. Thank you. Amber, what about you? What are you facing both on sort of the entry-level talent pipeline and how that impacts your overall talent strategy?
I'm smiling because truly when they handed out the questions and Shelley and I both got this question, we both looked at each other and said, I'm not sure that's really affecting us the same way. So my name is Amber Kennelly. I'm the head of HR for William Blair. William Blair is a private partnership, global investment bank, investment management, equity sales, research, trading. Great firm headquartered here in Chicago, 90 years old. Love it. Not a manufacturing facility. and still thinking about AI maybe a little bit differently than we read in the press all the time. And I was very reassured, in fact, when I was waiting for my Uber, because I have a broken foot, when I was waiting for my Uber earlier and I was scrolling on my phone, on Ignites was an article that reinforced exactly what I'm going to share in a moment. And the headline was, AI might be able to replace the grunt work, but doesn't replace the job. And so when I'm thinking about this response from a William Blair perspective, I think about our investment bank in particular. Our investment bank, we really embrace the apprenticeship model. It's important. We hire a lot of first year, straight out of school, really smart, bright people. And they do use AI. AI is helpful. But it does not replace our first year hiring. And in fact, in many ways, managing the work that they do with AI becomes a whole separate body of work. So we embrace the apprenticeship model. We believe that this model brings our first year people into teams where they're working through cycles and repetition and learning the essential skills, analyses, and presentation work that will be required of them as they continue to elevate. And I would say, too, that as a fundamentally client service-oriented firm, AI doesn't replace that relationship building, working on teams, collaborating across the firm, and serving the client. So for us, we're not backing off first-year hiring. What we're doing instead is working to understand how can AI help alleviate some of the pressures that we might know related to investment banking, but it does not replace first-year hiring.
That's great, thanks. I don't know, Corey, what would you add to that? What are you seeing more broadly?
So broadly, we don't see any evidence of broad displacement of workers as a result of AI. Hiring for entry-level workers is slow because hiring overall is slow. There may be some areas on the margin that aren't necessarily, we're not seeing much of a recovery in hiring or boost in hiring as interest rates come down because employers are being cautious and they're experimenting and they're trying to figure out whether they can use it or not. But overall, the reason why the labor market is slow is very much driven by higher interest rates. And when you look even at software engineers, one of the main occupations where we say, yes, this is going to significantly impact them. A lot of this AI does coding. It can replace those entry-level software engineers. The pace of hiring for entry-level software engineers is about the same as experienced software engineers we see on LinkedIn. They are both very slow, let's be clear. But that is not coming from AI, and that slowdown happened before the public release of ChatGPT. And in fact, that slowdown slowed, as in it didn't get worse after the release of ChatGPT. So it is very much what we're seeing in the labor market driven by the macroeconomy. Now, there are some studies out there, and I take issue with some of them. They're under peer review at the moment. So we'll see how the peer review goes. So there are certainly some studies out there that are suggesting that younger workers are disproportionately impacted because of the tasks that they do. And I agree with them that if we do see an impact from AI, it is going to hit younger workers first based on the tasks that they do, which are fairly repetitive. But we just aren't seeing evidence for that right now. The overall labor market is just running slow. Blaming it on AI, saying that we're doing layoffs because of AI, maybe there are a lot of companies out there who are trying to experiment and figure that out, but the AI adoption rate is probably somewhere below 40%. Of course, depending on what consultancy firm you ask, they'll tell you it's 80%, which is nonsense, right? It's probably somewhere between 10 and 40%. And with an adoption rate at 10 and 40%, where a lot of companies don't even actually know, they're paying for it, but they don't know how they want to use it, you can imagine that that's probably not affecting the workforce too much right now.
It's great. I totally agree. It's just really interesting to hear. There's sort of this like mythology out there that's like, and I think just hearing directly from the three of you on what you're really seeing is helpful. Corey, I want to go off script for a second because I thought there was a really good question from the audience. Both you and I talked about sort of like the change in demographics in the workforce. The question is specifically, well, we're talking about the aging workforce, but we've been talking about that forever. So what's different about the next 5-10 years versus the last 5 years? I know you have a chart on this that I wish I had. So.
It's the pace. So up to about 2015, the percentage of folks who was retiring, or over 65, that was increasing kind of at a straight line. And then around 2015, that line bent and started going up faster. And it's going to keep going up faster until 2050. So it is really just an issue that it has accelerated. And we may not necessarily feel the impact of it now, but when I go out and talk to LinkedIn partners and customers, a lot of them are saying, well, my older folks, they're not retiring yet, but I am worried because I do have a bulk of them. This is particularly true in areas like healthcare, where there are lots of nurses who are older and at some point they're going to retire, while demand for healthcare services is only increasing, potentially exponentially in some areas. So just because we're not seeing that yet, right, there's a kind of a cloud over us right now. That cloud is the macroeconomic environment, that is uncertainty. It's kind of clouding a lot of the broad trends that are affecting our lives. But at some point, that cloud is going to pull back and we will see laid bare all of the structural problems that we have and imbalances in the labor market. So you have to be prepared for that.
More really cheery thoughts from Corey. No, I'm kidding. All right, I want to sort of shift gears a little bit, and Shelley, maybe I'll ask you this one. There's a lot that I read about sort of skill-based hiring and skill-based sort of like talent strategies. Maybe talk a little bit about what that looks like at USG, practically, how does that manifest? And then what does that do like for more softer skills, leadership skills, things like that?
So I've been with USG almost 29 years, and I feel fortunate that we've actually been doing some skills-based testing early on in the process of hiring people. For our entry-level manufacturing positions, we had them doing kind of the bubble dot tests of seeing, we need people who are able to read and understand numbers at that point. We still need them to read, but there's a lot of things that can be done for them. But we were ensuring that you weren't just telling us that you could read or you did know how to read a tape measure. We were actually doing some skills-based testing. Now we do things a little bit elevated. We're actually walking them through some scenarios with not only our hourly employees, but our salaried professionals. We're hiring a senior director for our digital transformation, and that is a role for us that is not one we can gamble on and lose. And so we have actually created several scenarios that this person has to prove out to us that they have actually done this. And it's not just telling us, it's showing us the work that they've done. And so putting more emphasis on the modeling of the behavior that we're looking for, the skills. What is this doing for us from the standpoint of we've seen people be able to hit the ground running for the roles that we have when you know that they're a fit. And so that has really helped us across the board. And then, what are we looking for? It doesn't matter what role you're in, the ability to communicate effectively across people. And so, working with people on what that looks like. Problem solving is a big deal. You could have equipment that is controlled by a computer that is supposed to take care of everything, but the minute everything goes wrong, you need to know what needs to happen. And so having problem solving skills is incredibly important. And Deborah Satterley, our director of learning and development, is here in the room with me, and she worked on a project last year. We get a lot of questions from our professional employees of how do I get from here to here? And so what Deborah and her team did is it was called Project Rockwall, because as you know, careers are never necessarily just straight up, but what do you need to do to get to what it is you want to do? And so Deborah and her team defined what are the different things that you need to do from a development standpoint to see where you need to go focused on some of these areas.
I love that, both the idea that sort of skill-based hiring is not as new as some people think, like some industries have been doing it for a long time, and then also like how do you weave that into the broader sort of career discussion? I think that's really powerful. Thank you. Next, I want to move to a discussion about data and analytics, and maybe Amber, I can start with you. Obviously there's, as we just talked about, there's lots going on in the world. I'm sure your leaders are saying, before you make any big decisions, what does the data show? So how are you using data, or how would you wish you were using data, to help drive some of the decision making in your organization?
Sure. I'll share our experiences, which I imagine probably mirror a number of folks' experiences in this room. When we desire to be using more data in our analysis. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first is capability. So as a head of HR for an organization, people don't generally go into HR because they love Excel. So we started there. So there was some Power BI training, some Excel training. There was just capability. And I mean, I am a true nerd, so I might be the opposite of that, but I appreciate it. You have to meet people where they're at and start there. So we started with capability building. I think the second issue that we encountered, probably just like everybody else, is data integrity. So we have systems. We have Workday, great system. We have Power BI systems. We have legacy systems. We have other people's Excel spreadsheets. And making sure that we were being able to use clean data to put together anything and knew the source of the data, the validity of the data, and were comfortable enough with that. I would say we've made great progress, but we continue on this journey. So clean data, really important. I think the third piece is an appreciation that data doesn't tell you everything, right? It's a place to start. So how do we incorporate then the qualitative information that we have as we're looking to gather insights and like really reach conclusions based on the information we have? So things like Energage or our engagement survey, feedback that we get from team exercises that we're working on, leadership feedback, even hallway feedback. What other pieces of information do you have that you can bring to the numbers to tell the whole story? And then that leads me to the last piece, which is entirely storytelling with data. So you can't just flash a whole bunch of numbers and say, see, that explains everything, because it does not. So helping to equip any of our leaders with the capability of being able to tell a story, make it obvious, like make the data, make the story obvious, and the conclusion and insights appropriate. So those were a few things that we encountered as I've talked with others. I think that's fairly similar to the journeys others have gone on, but I think that we still have progress to go. We've made great strides, and I'm really excited for next year within my team, because we've now cleaned up our data and moved it all into a data lake. And the team has built a Power BI that should give us a lot of flexibility. So maybe next year I'll have a different answer, but that's my answer for right now.
That's great. So if anybody wants to hear about HR data in a data lake, talk to Amber during the cocktail hour. Shelley, maybe same question for you, but I want to color it a little bit more based on something that came through. How are you using data and analytics to drive decision making at USG? And are you using data to sort of prove what you talked about earlier around skill-based hiring?
So I'd like to say USG is almost 125 years old. And I was with USG for 25 years and thought we did data really well. I left for 2.5 and went to the auto industry as the chief people officer and got there and realized I needed data to go down the hall to the bathroom to make a decision. It was that, I mean, it is used much more than what I had ever experienced. So I did warn the team when I came back, I'm not the same person I was before. We are going to stop being anecdotal, and we are going to have facts when we are presenting things. And not that we weren't before, but not to the extent that we are now. And the interesting thing is that I felt like we are a shared service. We are here to support you and guide our leaders and our employees. And oftentimes our manufacturing leadership team was kind of telling us how we were going to spend our time. And as I said, we had a lot of turnover. So we were meeting with them to talk about how do we stem this turnover. And the team did a really good collaborative job of coming up with 15 different ways a manufacturing plant could put into place to stem turnover. Happy to share them with you if you're at all interested. And then 7 months later, we had a plant managers meeting, and the vice president of manufacturing came to one of my team members and said, we need you to come up with 5 or 6 more so we can discuss at this meeting. They came to me and I'm like, no. I want to know what the plants have implemented and what is actually in place. Less than 15% of our plants had put in even one thing. And so we, instead of putting the HR team into a spin on doing more things, we pushed back and said, let's try these things. And we have found that those things have worked. Now, there have been things that also haven't worked, so fail fast and move on to the next. But I think we're able to more accurately provide feedback when we have data that we can study to have a good conversation about.
Yeah, the idea, I mean, I love that story, and it's so interesting as I see others move from company to company, different industries, you start to get a much better view of how data could and should be used within the people function. Corey, maybe over to you, like what are you seeing more broadly? Any sort of like real bright stars in how data is being used to drive people decisions?
So there isn't really someone who I've met with they stand out.
Okay.
But what I do advise, particularly talent leaders when thinking about data, well, there are a couple things to be aware of. One, the data is always too much or too little. It's never just right. That's what you're going to find once you start getting into it. And of course, all the things that Amber and Shelley said are very true. Definitely data storytelling is critical. Leaders don't want you to just come in there and put up a number. They want to understand the limitations of the number. What's the story behind the number? You need to know the why. You need to have your story for why. And often folks who are in HR, they're not necessarily versed in what's going on in the broad industry or the talent market. They know their pipeline, how to recruit, how are they training. They know their job and they know their job well, but they don't necessarily have the broader context. So what I always encourage is when you're starting out working with data, thinking about data, you need to have a mental model. You need to start with that mental model of how you're going to use it and where you're going to use it. So for example, suppose you're trying to evaluate how well your company is doing in terms of morale. And you look at your numbers and you look at your numbers from last quarter or from last year. Often you only have 3 years of data if you're lucky. And you say, well, we're doing a little bit better than what we were last year. But you don't really have a benchmark. So what do? You go on Glassdoor. You look at your competitors, not your competitors for your company, but your competitors for talent. And you look at them. You see how they're doing. If they are increasing, if they're rising, are there any movements that you're seeing that are joint to all of you that are happening in the industry? Then look more broadly, is overall, what does workforce confidence look like? Do workers feel pessimistic? Do they feel more optimistic? So now you're starting to build that mental model. Is it the macroeconomy? Is it that next level? Is it the industry? Is it something niche, a particular segment of the market? By having these layers of data, starting out with that mental model, then you know where to go. You don't just go on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website and look at a bunch of unemployment rates and try to make sense of them. You say, well, we are having a hard time hiring. Are my talent competitors having a hard time hiring? No, they're not, so it's probably not them, it's me. That's how you want to use that data. You want to take the data, move from data to information. Data is just often a bunch of numbers or a bunch of text. You take that data, you make it into information. You take that information, you move that into insights. That's what Amber and Shelley are talking about when they say data storytelling. You're taking that data, you are making that into insights, and as business leaders, not just talent leaders, you're taking those insights and you're making that into actionable information that your leaders can act on. What is the so what? What is the takeaway? What should we be doing as a result of that information? And one thing I can tell you is that increasingly CHROs are being asked to not only be talent leaders, but also business leaders. So coming in with a plan to say, well, we should do this program because this is going to increase our pipeline for an area where we're having a really tough time hiring. We should partner with this university. We need to spend this much money. What's the return? Being able to assess the return. That is increasingly being asked of CHROs.
I love that, and you've actually spurred a question. I'm going to probe a little bit on this one. I've heard from all three of you, there's almost three things. There's understanding the business to form the hypotheses and the questions. There's actually having a data analytic skill and interest, and then there's storytelling. Do you find, and maybe Shelley and Amber, I'll turn to you guys, do you guys have an individual that has all three of those skills, or do you piece it together with different people across your HR teams? I don't know if either of you have a thought. Because if you have that person, I think everyone in the room wants them.
I guess maybe my initial reaction to that is that it's a team sport, and you've got the right team that completes all of the needs. So I'm thinking about a recent meeting that we had with our executive committee. We're talking about global benefits. to your point, building the case, what is the ROI, what are we solving? My role was storyteller, but I was not the data role. The data role was definitely someone else. And for us, in that moment, in that example, the tag team was the most effective way to go, because I think they needed in that scenario to have a couple of different voices. They needed to trust the data, and the data was with the expert where it should have been, and I was more the executive telling the executive story. So I might not say anyone, maybe they do have all of those skills, but we generally will approach it maybe more as a team.
That's kind of what I thought, and I like to hear that, because I think there's this thought that it's like, oh, there's this mythical, like, I'll build a workforce analytics team, and they'll be able to do that whole thing, where I think it's the partnership of the business partners, that analytics team, the HR leadership team working together to really glean everything. Okay, thank you. I talked a little bit about this in some of my opening comments, how shockingly, just like 2-3 years ago, we were in this like moment of the Great Resignation, and all of us were freaking out about 100% turnover and things like that. And maybe I'll show of hands, who's actually got lower attrition than they want? Some of us, yeah. So I'd love to hear, and maybe Shelley, we start with you. A people in HR, a talent strategy looks very different when you've got low attrition. How are you dealing with that? Does that change your overall talent strategy?
So we're fortunate now from a professional standpoint. We've been fairly static around our turnover, and it's been the right turnover in the last year. We're still flattening out our hourly turnover, but we are a culture of, we want you to come stay with us. We want you to say that you've been here for 20 plus years. So when I saw the question, I'm like, is this supposed to be bad? That this is, job hugging's bad? But I understand, we want somebody to be engaged. We don't want a job hugger that is not engaged. And so at USG, we spend an incredible amount of time and effort and data analytics around people's engagement and what we're going to do with it. We do stay interviews. Why do you stay with us? And then we do exit interviews. We're still working on how well we use that data. But, when you don't have, as we all know in this room, when somebody is not engaged, it is incredibly painful for not only them, but for the people that work around them. And so the key is figuring out how do you engage people, and you can't do that with everyone. Some people just need to be made available to the industry if you can't get them engaged. And so at USG, we welcome job hugging and quiet stay, so.
I love that perspective, because you're right. I mean, some organizations, it is their talent strategy to have people for 20 plus years. Others are, their entire function is built around having people for 5, 6, 7 years. And when you don't have that, it's like, oh, maybe we need to change our programs in some way. I don't know, Corey, anything you'd add, anything you're seeing?
Well, if you read the headlines, you would think that we were all laid off and didn't have jobs, but we were also not quitting our jobs. So make it make sense. The actual reality is that there is not a big stay or a great stay that is broad across the labor market. That's just not what we see in terms of looking at quits and people quitting their job. Hiring leads quits. So quits are slower because there aren't as many opportunities to go to. People do not quit their job to stay home. They quit their job to go to a new one. And there are less new jobs to go to, so yes, there is less quitting. But if we look at the quit rate for different industries, unless you are in information, which is very tech-heavy, media-heavy, or professional services, legal, accounting, consulting, the quit rates are about what we've seen historically. They are about average. And in fact, in some areas like healthcare, they're above average of what we've seen historically. So some folks in this room are probably still dealing with an elevated quit rate, because the real big stay was actually after the Great Recession. No one quit their job because there were no jobs to go to. So that was when we saw very low attrition, and if you compare that to what we've seen over the last few years, most people are still closer to the Great Reshuffle than what they are to the Great Recession.
Great, I appreciate that. I want to switch gears, and maybe Amber, this one's for you. Obviously, we talked about this broadly in our opening comments, but there's so much going on in the world, and many organizations are going through transformation after transformation after transformation, expecting more different from their employees. How have you seen, or have you tried to deal with sort of resistance to change and skepticism, which then starts to get into disengagement? Any lessons learned around that?
Sure. I guess maybe I'd start from a place that I don't think people inherently want to resist change. I think we're tired and we're fatigued with change. So I think this actually just makes us human. So starting with a thought that this is a human leadership function is maybe how I'd think about it first. And then the second is that those who know me know that I love Simon Sinek, start with why. So I've generally found in my experience, people are much more willing to come along with change when they understand why are you doing this and what's in it for me. So if people are resisting change, I might ask the question, have I done my work to build the business case? Do people understand what problem we're trying to solve? Have I presented data in a compelling way that it's obvious? And if I haven't done that, then we need to go back and start and do that, because I just don't believe that people resist change to be difficult. They resist change because they're tired, they're not engaged, or they don't feel like they've been a part of the journey. So go back and start over and redo that. And in my experience would say, people that feel like they're being co-collaborative in change generally will move along a little bit easier. So, I mean, maybe that's how I'd think about it. And I would say that it's incumbent upon us to help equip our leaders, managers, and colleagues with skills to be able to know how to think about change so that it doesn't feel so scary, so that it does feel like just there's a change arc. At some point in this arc, you're going to feel nervous. You're going to feel angry. You're going to feel like you've lost something. And then guess what? You're going to come out on the other side. Normal. This is all normal. So when we start bringing some humanity to it, I feel like it just becomes an easier discussion.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I work with an organization that's fully adopted sort of the visual of the change curve, and it's part of their vocabulary. And people are like, well, I'm at a high point in the change curve, or I've backtracked in the change curve. Like, it's just this nice normalizing of the very natural sort of journey that people go through. I love that. By the way, I'm getting great questions, so please do keep the questions coming in. We don't have a ton of time, but I'm going to hit a couple. One of the ones that came in, I did want to see if any of you had thoughts on the idea of upskilling and reskilling. Hear about it out in the world. I mentioned it earlier. Some organizations are doing this, some are trying it, some are not doing it at all. Any lessons learned, anything you guys have tried with reskilling and upskilling your workforce? Shelley, I see you nodding.
So to Corey's point about, we have lots of people retiring. We have created an upskilling task force team, which Deborah, again, is a member of, along with several of our operational leaders and it's really focused on supervisory skills. And our foremen, general foremen, hourly supervisors at the plants normally come up through the entry-level operator level and don't have those skills. And so we are being very deliberate in spending time of what do they need to know in order to be successful, because good engagement often is tied to good leadership. And so we want to make sure that those individuals are ready for that role should they want it. And so a lot of time is being spent, and it's skills-based training from the standpoint of we are giving them real live examples of this person did this, how would you handle it? And if there is a response that is not what we would desire, we have some coaching on these are some things you could think about.
I love that because it ties to your earlier point about being very transparent and maybe even proactive about career paths, and that actually sort of facilitates exactly what you're talking about. That's great. All right, I want to squeeze one more question in before the big prediction question. And maybe, Shelley, we could start with you on this one and see how others want to join. We live in a hyper-personalization world. I go home, Netflix tells me what I want to watch, Amazon tells me what I should buy, my Instagram feeds the algorithm. How are you bringing personalization into the employee sort of journey and life cycle, both from attraction, hiring, engagement? Any lessons learned there?
That is not always easy, because once you get in a groove on something and you like doing something, when somebody says they don't like the way you're doing it, sometimes that's a challenge. But I think feedback is very important in this aspect. It doesn't mean you can meet everybody where they're at, but listening to try and understand what people are asking for is important. And so at USG, we've done a few things intentionally. Our rewards program, we have what's called the Above and Beyond platform. We used to have another vendor you could pick from, like 100 items. You had points, and our service anniversary program rolled into it, and we were getting a lot of feedback that people were not finding it useful. And so we put in a platform that intentionally allowed people to pick from lifestyle items, flights, movie, there were this whole gamut, and the reception to it was much better, and people actually saw it as recognition because they had hundreds of thousands of options that they could choose from. And it was all because we got that feedback during our engagement survey around what people wanted to see for themselves. And so we've done that. We've also, from a training and development standpoint, we have done a lot of different things to try and meet people's learning needs. And one of them is the YouTube generation of, I don't want somebody to tell me how to do it. I want to be able to watch a 30-second, 1-minute video of how to do something and then go do it myself. And so we have instituted a platform that's being tried at a couple of our plant locations where people have access to iPads and can just pull up a video on how to do something. And we've gotten really good feedback.
That's fantastic. I can't think of how many organizations waste time and money on these recognition programs. Employees don't feel recognized by them. So how tweaks to that can really actually yield what you're trying to achieve. That's great. Amber, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I did. I echo what you're saying about learning and making it quick and just in time absolutely feels critical these days, so having those options. And I would also say that one of the things that we are doing, while we cannot meet everyone where they're at, so this is not one-to-one personalization, one of the things that we do really try to make sure that we're focusing on when we're doing any of our communications or building any of our development plans is making sure that we're listening to an inclusive group of people for input and feedback. So if we are only listening to one generation or one experience, we're for sure missing the point. And so what we really try to do is make sure that we've incorporated an inclusive focus group when we're doing benefits, that we are asking our different employee alliances their point of view when we're communicating, so that we can make sure that we are not inadvertently not doing something that feels inclusive, which is one of our important values. So I would just say that not one-on-one personalization, but being super thoughtful to make sure that we're trying to cover a lot of different voices, perspectives, and experiences is something that we've definitely been focusing on.
It's so powerful, and so often we don't do that, so that's a good one. All right, let's wrap up. I'm getting like the hook. As I started, we want some predictions. So shockingly, 2026 is not that far away. So I don't know, any predictions from any of you on this panel? All three of you are like, I don't have one. Corey, let's start with you. As you look to 2026, what do you see from the talent landscape?
I think in 2026, we're going to have to start having a conversation about trust. We haven't really had that conversation yet, but I think we're going to have to, especially in an age of AI, where candidates may not be who they appear to be, where employers may not be who they appear to be. I think we're going to have a serious conversation in the talent space about trust. What does it mean to have trust? What does it mean to build trust with your workforce? Particularly at a time where, as you all understand, the workforce is not happy. When we ask our members on LinkedIn how they feel about their confidence for their career prospects, their finances, their ability to move up in their career, it's the worst they've felt, worse than the pandemic. And when you have a crisis of confidence, what do you have? You can't pay them more. We're not in a position where we can dole out money to solve the problem, as we were able to when interest rates were zero. So, what do you have left? It's relationships. It's trust. So how do we build trust? How do we maintain trust? Especially as you start on a journey where you're thinking about adopting AI. You have a workforce that's very uncomfortable with that. If I use AI, you want me to use AI for my job, but if I use AI, does it look like do I look replaceable? How do you build trust in using these tools and what the outcomes will be for using these tools? So I think next year we're going to have that conversation in the talent space.
I love that as a prediction, the era of trust, because I don't know about you all, that is not something that we have like a quick like toolkit for. Like, oh, I'm just going to fix that really. So I like that one. Any other predictions from the panel?
So I told them I was afraid of this question, but I have an answer, so I have one now. So my bold prediction is not so bold. It may be a little bit of the Dr. Obvious, but I think for those of us who are people leaders, our jobs are just going to continue to be more and more challenging because the landscape of what we deal with on an hourly and daily basis, it's just going to stay the same, for the time being. And so we need to get comfortable with change and be prepared for the unexpected because that's what's coming. And so being comfortable with the unexpected is, I think, where we have to be as people leaders.
Okay, that was a good one.
Amber?
Yeah. Okay, if I'm a betting person, I'm going to bet on both of those. And mine is probably the first cousin to these. So I would say that my bold prediction is, perhaps not surprisingly given one of my other answers, humanity will come first. So one of my favorite leadership kind of North Stars has always been human first. I have a notebook with it on the front. I believe deeply we are all professionals, but we are all humans first. And for all the reasons that we've highlighted related to AI, everything going on in our world, I think being able to recognize that we have to bring that into everything that we're doing and appreciate that with everyone we're interacting with. And we don't know what's going on in everyone's worlds, but we are all human beings first that are dealing with all of this. So when I think about what that means for us as people leaders, I think about that really means focusing on purposeful connection with people, purposefully cultivating that connection. I think it's about designing more human-centered processes, programs, and intentionally fostering identity, purpose, and connection. So my bold prediction is, maybe not so bold, hey, we're all people trying to do the best we can.
I love that. All right, so bringing humanity back into HR, I'm going to go with that. The continued importance of the people function in general, and then rebuilding trust or focusing on building trust with our employees. So 3 great predictions, 3 great panelists. Thank you all. This was really wonderful. I appreciate it.
Amazing panel. So thank you, Rick, thank you, Corey, thank you, Shelley, thank you, Amber, for just such a thoughtful and insightful conversation. One of the things I love to do are take lots of notes, and so you all have given me plenty to work with, but I'd like to just sort of at least give you the little nugget that I probably took away from each of you. And so, Rick, I thought it was interesting how you talked about the acceptance of AI in a personal use perspective, but not quite there yet on the professional side. So that's something that was very interesting to me. One of the many things that you said that was interesting to me. And then Corey, you're such a positive, uplifting guy on our call. Yes, and I just so appreciate you. But the one thing that I took away in translating that I got this sort of that data is like the anti-Goldilocks of HR. It's like too much, too little, but never just right. And so I heard that loud and clear. And then as I think, let me get this right, Amber. I want to make sure I attribute the right thing to the right folks. But, well, this is actually, I think, Shelley, I got this from you, that really getting an understanding of the mythology, like the fact versus fiction of what's happening on the AI front and how it's impacting your business. And I really appreciated, and I said this on our prep call too, I just really appreciated the industries that you all represent, because there's so much variety in how people are using these tools, but yet there's so much similarity as well in terms of the pace of that change too. And, you know, and Amber, I really do appreciate the continued focus on humanity. And yeah, although I did think it was interesting that people don't go into HR to use spreadsheets because they love spreadsheets, I actually was an accounting major and an HR major. So it's like got a little bit of both in my world, but again, appreciating that we need to continue to focus on humanity. And so I just really took so much away from this panel. And so fortunately, I know that I have a great team in the room that's going to be writing down all these great takes for us so that we could share them with our broader audience. So before we adjourn to the reception, I hope you will attend some of our upcoming events as well. So we have a few things that are going on. I actually have to read my comments between all the notes that I took, always all over them. But one program that we have coming up next week is a workshop called Artistic Disruption for Business Innovation. And this is really one of our first programs that we're going to be doing that we're featuring as part of our Creative Futures Lab. And we're partnering with the Chicago Innovation on an immersive hands-on workshop designed to collide art and business in unexpected ways. And so for the leaders who want to step beyond predictable thinking, reframe disruption, and unlock new approaches to innovation, we're inviting you all to join us for that. And then the same week, later that week, on Thursday, October 16th, we have a workshop, Leading Boldly, Unlocking Your Strengths. And this workshop is designed for professionals and leaders across industries who want to deepen self-awareness, boost collaboration, and lead with greater clarity and confidence. And the last one I'll mention, granted we have a lot of programs that are happening, and I invite you to go to our website, but on Tuesday, October 21st, we have a great conversation coming up, a fireside chat between Mary Dillon, who's the former CEO of Ulta Beauty and Foot Locker, with Harry Kramer, who's the former CEO of Baxter International, and also my former Kellogg professor, but he don't like to mention that part that much, but Harry is terrific. And so they'll be having a conversation on how values shape decisions, who've really, from these two leaders who've lived their lives through values and moments of transformation. So we have a great lineup just in the next couple of weeks that we hope you all will join us. And I also invite you, I heard so many great points from you all today, and actually a lot of ideas around future programs. Like I met a demographer that I'm like, we should have them here to talk about some of the things that you mentioned, Corey. But if we have set up an ideas mailbox so that we can get all this great insights from you as to what type of programs we should be doing. So in the mailbox is real simple. It's ideas@executivesclub.org. So it's pretty simple. So we hope that we'll continue to hear your thoughts and ideas and your reflections as you hear from great panelists like the ones we had today. So with that, I'll now welcome another great friend of the club, Anna from UL. Where is Anna? There's Anna, to close us out. Thank you all again.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Matuszewska, Vice President of Talent at UL Solutions, a global applied safety science leader that provides testing, inspection, certification, and advisory services in the safety, security, and sustainability space. I know Dory has already thanked our panelists here, but again, I just really appreciate, and I know I speak for all of us when I say it was really engaging and motivating discussion and to hear all your insights. We at UL Solutions are faced with very similar challenges. We talk about human-centered employee experiences, while at the same time, we do focus on automation and AI enablement. It was interesting, as I was reading a recent article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about as the rise of AI is actually calling for more soft skills to be present in our environment. And we at UL Solutions, again, we focus on technical talent a lot, but really pride ourselves on focusing on ability to connect with others, resilience, and leading with purpose as a big element of our leadership development programs. These kinds of conversations, I think, really embolden all of us to think differently about our recruitment strategies, about employee engagement, workforce dynamics, and the integration of AI. So tonight's conversation truly underscored a lot of powerful themes that, again, talk about that human-centered leadership and how that shows up when we're constantly adapting to technological change. I know it's going to help me, it's going to help my team, it's going to help all of you as you look into 2026 priorities. So with that, again, final thank you for all of you being here, and we invite you to continue the discussion at the reception. Enjoy the rest of your evening.